Both Marvel and DC have a bad habit of slapping a fresh coat of spandex on the other's intellectual property and calling it their original work. But it's especially true when it comes to Stan Lee and company. So today, let's look at all the characters that Marvel stole from DC. During the dark days of World War II, the pages of More Fun Comics number 73 brought readers a little excitement and a much-needed breath of fresh air with the introduction of a new costumed crime fighter. This brightly clad vigilante had no powers of his own, but decided to battle evil with the most modern and practical weapon there was, a bow and arrow that he never actually used to shoot anyone. This was, of course, the Green Arrow, a master of marksmanship, taking justice to the streets and rooftops with an eagle eye, trick arrows, and an arsenal of crime-fighting gadgets that earned him an invite to the Justice League. 20 years later, Marvel decided that late was better than never and introduced Hawkeye, a co-creation of Stan Lee and artist Don Heck. Hawkeye, a villain-turned-superhero recruited by his world's resident super team after a stint fighting Iron Man, also rocks some old-fashioned long-ranged weaponry, complete with his own set of trick arrows. Let's be fair, though. Considering he's a crime-fighting millionaire bachelor with no superpowers who owns an arrow car, an arrow cave, aeroplane, and fights bad guys with the help of a youthful ward in a bright red outfit, Oliver Queen wasn't exactly a new concept himself. The original version of DC's Green Lantern was created all the way back in 1940 and is one of the weirder and more popular characters of the Golden Age. His name was Alan Scott, an engineer who discovered a magic lantern and ring that gave him superpowers, leaving him vulnerable only to weapons made out of wood. Also, his costume had way less green than you might expect, but the mostly red and purple with green pants lantern wouldn't fit on the cover. Obviously, that's a pretty silly concept that wouldn't work for a more experienced audience, so when the Silver Age rolled around in 1959, DC rebooted the Green Lantern as a far more sophisticated sci-fi character. This was Hal Jordan, who received a magic space lantern and ring from a dying alien that gave him superpowers, leaving him vulnerable only to anything that was yellow. See, much more realistic. The newer version of the hero also introduced the idea of the Green Lantern Corps, an intergalactic peacekeeping force with hundreds of alien members. It's a pretty solid, enduring concept. So solid, in fact, that Marvel decided in the mid-70s to introduce their universe to the man called Nova. Richard Rider, who only goes by Richard or Rich for obvious reasons, received a magic helmet from a dying alien that gave him superpowers and introduced him to an intergalactic peacekeeping force with hundreds of alien members. There was one big difference, though. Nova's weakness wasn't wood or the color yellow. It was the low sales that kept getting all his comics canceled. Pulling off an intercompany crossover where, for example, the Avengers fight the Justice League is actually a lot harder than it might seem for readers. You can't just draw the Hulk punching Superman and call it a day.
And Hulk. Smash.
You had to sort out the legal issues, figure out a plot that could require both teams, and come up with a satisfactory story where neither team actually loses, so they can go back to their own universe without losing any credibility to the competition. Pulling off a story where the Avengers fight a bunch of suspiciously familiar people who are definitely not the Justice League, wink wink, is a whole lot easier. That's how we got the Squadron Supreme, Marvel's answer to the question, how far can you take a pastiche before it becomes legally actionable? Members include Hyperion, a square-jawed, super-strong alien decked out in primary colors, a long cape, and prominent underpants. There's Nighthawk, a brilliant billionaire detective and fearsome martial artist dressed like a nocturnal flying animal. Power Princess is an alliterative Amazon warrior who can deflect bullets. Dr. Spectrum serves as a multicolored lantern, and Whizzer can run really fast, presumably on his way to the bathroom. Recently, Marvel even moved them to the nation's capital so they could accurately be described as DC's greatest heroes. Washington, DC's greatest heroes, that is. If good artists copy and great artists steal, it's no wonder that Squadron Supreme is one of Marvel's best comics ever. Back in the years before Brie Larson was Captain Marvel and long before Zachary Levi was Shazam, Shazam was Captain Marvel, and Captain Marvel was a bunch of other people. If you don't know the story, here's what happened. The most popular superhero of the 1940s, outselling even Superman at the height of his popularity, was a young boy named Billy Batson, who transformed into Captain Marvel, the world's mightiest mortal, by saying a magic word.
Shazam!
Wait, for real?
DC wasn't wild about the blatant similarities between Captain Marvel and their flagship character Superman, and essentially sued Captain Marvel's publisher into oblivion, ending his series in the 50s and then eventually buying the character outright a few decades later. In the 25 years between the end of Captain Marvel's Golden Age adventures and DC bringing it back, the copyright on the name Captain Marvel had expired, and a hot new company called Marvel Comics had burst onto the scene. For obvious reasons, the new publisher created and copyrighted their own new character named after the company, Captain Marvel. They spent the next several decades reviving, rebooting, and recreating Captain Marvel characters to retain the rights to the name, until Carol Danvers, who had quite a few superhero names herself, ascended to the title in 2012. By the time DC got around to bringing the original Captain Marvel into the fold, they couldn't legally use his name in the titles of the comics. As a result, they had names like Power of Shazam, until they finally gave up on the Captain Marvel name in 2011, conceding this particular never-ending battle to their competitors at Marvel Comics once and for all. From a storytelling perspective, magic superheroes have always been a tough sell for readers. Even fans who are 100% down to clown with Batman's shark repellent spray can get kinda snippy when the same sort of plot contrivances come from a guy with a knowledge of cosmic-level sleight of hand. Still, there are at least two big magicians in the comic book universe with staying power, and they bear a striking resemblance to each other. Dr. Fate came out of the gate swinging in 1940 as a result of the pulp hero craze as an all-purpose mystic vigilante. Eventually, he was fleshed out into the greatest magician of the DC universe, powered by unfathomable mystical forces. He's not to be confused with Doctor Strange, Marvel's Sorcerer Supreme, who showed up in 1963. Both characters have spent decades wowing readers with plot-driven magical abilities that allow them to do anything, except when they can't. They're not the most accessible characters, but in the 90s, a big crossover combined them into a single dude called Dr. Strangefate, who was also Professor X, reaching new heights and mystically making readers wonder what the heck is going on. The similarities between Marvel's X-Men and DC's Doom Patrol have been a point of nerdy debate since pretty much day one. Both debuted in 1963, and both featured outcast superheroes shunned by society gathered by a wheelchair-bound intellectual leader. They even had similar villains. The X-Men fought the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, while the Doom Patrol went after the Brotherhood of Evil. Doom Patrol carried the tagline of the world's strangest heroes, as opposed to the X-Men, who were, quote, the strangest superheroes of all. Coincidence? Maybe. There was only a 3-month gap between one and the other, so the turnaround time would have had to have been pretty instant on Marvel's part, even in the small world of New York comics publishing. In any case, X-Men went on to be an Academy Award-winning multi-billion-dollar franchise, while Doom Patrol became a cult favorite and eventually got a streaming show. That's life for you. Let's settle this right now. There's no way Black Cat could have been inspired by Catwoman, and we know this because Marv Wolfman, the writer who co-created her, said so. And we assure you, he's very convincing. Sure, Catwoman and Black Cat have a lot in common on the surface. They're both feline-themed diamond thieves dressed in astonishingly similar costumes, and they both serve as on-again, off-again, semi-villainous romantic interests to wholesome heroes. And yes, Catwoman's debut preceded Black Cat's by the better part of 40 years. Here's the but, so to speak. In an interview with Comic Book Resources, Wolfman pointed out that Felicia Hardy's inception had nothing to do with Selina Kyle's already prominent role in comic book history. Even though she first appeared in Amazing Spider-Man and has primarily appeared in Spider-Man comics for the past 50 years, Wolfman says he created Black Cat as a foil for Spider-Woman. See, she's completely different. The story of Deadpool's genesis is legendary in the comic book community as one of the all-time examples of sticking with a knockoff until you surpass the original. This one starts in the 1980s with DC's introduction of a new Teen Titans villain, Slade Wilson, aka Deathstroke, a hyper-agile super assassin juiced on government experimentation and a healthy dose of post-70s self-seriousness. Rob Liefeld, the artist and writer who was working on New Mutants in the early 90s, was a self-professed fan of the character, and when he created a new villain named Deadpool, a few people noticed the similarities.
Deadpool?
Deadpool? What? I'm not Deadpool.
I thought Deadpool was a good guy.
Why does everybody think I'm Deadpool?
You got them guns!
And the swords.
Liefeld then went a step further, naming the new guy Wade Wilson and a blatant riff on our old pal Slade. It doesn't end there, though. In 2006, the longtime Deadpool creative team of Joe Kelly and Ed McGuinness introduced a wacky alternate universe version of Deathstroke who seemed more than a little similar to Marvel's Mercenary. Then in 2014, they dropped all pretense by debuting a new character named Wayne Wilkins, aka Red Tool. Even better, he showed up on the pages of Harley Quinn, a book that was already DC's wacky anti-hero version of Deadpool. Jeez, guys, get a room already. Before he shocked moviegoers by being the most watchable part of Avengers Age of Ultron, the Vision was a deep-cut character who, despite being a longtime member of Earth's Mightiest Heroes, was a kind of guy that only the true die-hard fans cared about. Even by Marvel standards, he's complicated, and considering that this same universe has an immortal Canadian samurai ninja spy superhero, that's saying something. The Vision is a crimson-skinned android with a cape and human emotions made from the robotic body of a Golden Age hero, the original Human Torch. He's named for a different, more obscure Golden Age hero, the original Vision, but he has the brain patterns of yet another hero, Wonder Man. He was created by a supervillain, Ultron, but turned to the good side, which kinda sorta makes him Hank Pym's grandson and son at the same time. Comics. And if he wasn't based on enough characters already, we suspect that his creation in 1968 had something to do with DC's then recent addition to the Justice League, the Red Tornado, a crimson-skinned android with a cape and human emotions, named for an obscure Golden Age hero, created by a supervillain but turned to the good side, with a complicated origin that involves him joining the JLA after moving to their Earth from a parallel dimension. Comics. But hey, if nothing else, it's just nice that Paul Bettany finally got to show his face, and those comfy sweaters in a Marvel movie. Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more grunge videos about your favorite superheroes are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.